And the pattern is this. For whatever reason, for whatever happened, each one has different stories, different things that they took as fictional, and over time they created facts and laws that are not necessarily true, but to them it is true. And the pattern in almost all of them is they stopped believing in themselves. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, 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 welcome. You know what time it is. I hope you know what time it is. It's time for Life of a CISO with yours truly, Dr. E is in the house. Thank you so much for joining me. I always have such a good time. My team, this is my studio in my office where I do all my podcasts from, and my team is downstairs, and they always sometimes come up and check or laugh because they're like, do you have anyone in here with you? I'm like, no, why? They're like, you're just laughing and having a good time. I'm like, because I'm with my friends, right? They're virtual. They're not here with me, but I can feel all of your presence and appreciate all your support. And hopefully you enjoy them. You get a lot of valuable content, but most importantly, you have some fun and you laugh a little bit during my podcast. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And this is actually a continuation. So if you didn't watch the one from last week, you should go back and watch that. I sort of started this theme of fact versus fiction. It's an area I've sort of in my own personal life have been studying a lot, and I've been noticing it with many of my clients. One of the things that people go and ask, what are you really good at? What is sort of one of my special powers or my superpowers? And most people are like security or speaking or things like that. But the reality is one of my real superpowers that makes me very good at not only cybersecurity, but also coaching, and it's a good skill to develop, is pattern recognition. I can go in and I could look at organizations, many different organizations of many different shapes and sizes, and I recognize patterns, right? I recognize, okay, everyone is doing or making the same mistakes. Like for example, with a pretty good degree of accuracy, most organizations have systems that are accessible from the internet that are missing patches that contain critical data. Maybe it's not 100, maybe it's not all, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 3. But the reality is most of them have it, and that is the primary method in which organizations get compromised. If you look at most of the big organizations out there, most of the large breaches, most of the large compromises, and I don't need to name names, I don't like pointing out, especially as I continue to grow, some of those become my clients, and some of my clients, even though it's in the news and I'm not saying anything you can't Google or find out, they don't always like when I mention their names. So I'm a little more careful these days in doing that. But the reality is, in almost all those cases, it was the same exact pattern. There was a system that an attacker found that wasn't patched for whatever reason, and it might not have been up to date, it might have been slightly old, but it was still accurate and valuable, sensitive data, PII, personally identifiable information, and that was the system that was compromised. So that pattern recognition skill means I can go into a client, I can immediately say, okay, I want to look at your externally facing servers, I want to look at your patch reports, and I want to look at your DLP report, your data loss prevention, to see where your critical data is. And I can very, very quickly identify high-risk systems that in many cases either have been compromised that they didn't realize it or are going to be compromised. And clients always go, how did you do that so quick? We had people who have been with us for months and years and they weren't able to see that. And the issue is because I know what pattern to look for. And I know the patterns to go after. And same thing with my coaching. I notice these similar patterns. And one of the biggest patterns that I've talked about, but this series from last week and this week are going even deeper into it. But one of the patterns I've noticed with almost all of my clients, most people hire me, my typical go-to client that hires me for one-on-one coaching is somebody who's very talented. They've worked in cyber, they have experience, they have amazing experience. It's not always represented in their CV correctly, but they have amazing experience, and they are the perfect candidate for being a CISO. And I know if they were presented correctly and showed up correctly, which is what I do, they would have multiple job offers, and they would very, very quickly become a most valuable asset to their organization. And over many years, they would become world-class CISO, and every organization would want them. I mean, they are like the perfect clients. But you might say, well, if that's all true, why are they coming to me? Because they all have the same pattern. And the pattern is this. For whatever reason, for whatever happened, each one has different stories, different things that they took as fictional, and over time they created facts and laws that are not necessarily true, but to them it is true. And the pattern in almost all of them is they stopped believing in themselves. And let me be more specific. They stopped believing that they could be a CISO. Because most of them, if they stopped believing in themselves, they would have never made it to me. So they believe in themselves and they still have some hope. But the pattern with every single one of them is, for whatever reason, they do not think somebody is going to hire them as a CISO. They do not think they have enough experience. They do not think they have enough background. And for whatever reason, they've told themselves a false story. And as you'll hear in the first one, if you tell yourself a lie long enough and with enough conviction, it becomes true. So this is the whole idea of fact versus fiction, where we like to take fictional elements, tell ourselves it enough so it becomes a fact, and the reality is it's not factual. There's no data to support it. It's total and complete BS. But if you believe it to be a fact, and that's the story you tell yourself, it will hold you back, it will limit you, and it will not allow you to reach your full potential. So that's why I've started this series, and I've been pushing this a lot with my clients, is let's examine what it is, what are the stories you're telling yourself that you believe to be true, and let's make sure they're really true. And if they're not, let's destroy them. Let's annihilate them. Let's eliminate them. And then, most important part, let's tell yourself a new story that is 100% factual. So if you want to know what I do with my one-on-one clients, it's really simple. I get them to see and become aware of their false story, their limiting belief, their fictional statement that they think is a fact, and I shine a bright light on it to the point where they no longer believe it to be true. Then I allow them to create the new story that is factual based, let them believe it, encourage them, and then I look like a hero because they've been trying to get a job for 2 or 3 years. They have failed. They've had no offers. They haven't been able to become a CISO for 3 years. And they come to me, and within 4 to 5 months, they not only get a CISO job, in many cases, they have multiple CISO jobs. They often get paid more than they thought. And they give me a lot of credit. People on the outset look at what I do and think I'm this miracle maker. And the reality is, I did not do the work. They did. They did the hard work. They put in the effort. Because here's the reality. I can't force you to change. I can't go in, yes, I can go and tell you that story is false, that story is not true, and you need to stop believing it. But here's the reality. You don't know me that well. You're going to be like, no, Eric, it is true. So what I have to do is I have to get you to believe that it's not true. I have to get you to shift. I have to get you to change, and I have to get you to believe in the new story. You do all the work. I'm just a guide that sort of helps and shines things on you. So that has been the theme of the work. And like I said, have been getting amazing results this year. But the last couple of weeks, I'm thinking going, wait, it goes deeper. I'm getting these folks jobs as CISOs. But then I'm noticing some of them are excelling like crazy, and some of them are still struggling. So now I'm like, why is that? We changed their stories. We shifted their fictional facts to truth, but some are successful and some aren't. So now I'm going back and I'm like, okay, do what you do good, Eric, pattern recognition. So I started talking to them and observing and studying, and a few of them, the higher end clients, I actually spend a day with them. I sort of love doing that. I steal a lot, as you know, from my different podcasts. John Maxwell, highly respect, a wonderful, amazing person. If you ever have the chance to either listen to him or at the gym, just listen to some of his YouTube videos. They're amazing. Or if you ever have a chance to meet him, he's great. But one thing I love that John Maxwell told me, he goes, Eric, it's real simple. If I spend a day with you, one day, an entire day, not in any creepy way, but from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to sleep, all right? And I am there with you the entire time. I know everything I need to know about you, your thoughts, your beliefs, your values, and your identity. That when you are ready and you are open, you can change your entire life. And it's crazy, but it's true. Because how you do one thing is how you do everything. And we are creatures of habit. So here's the cool part. You can hire a John. You can hire a me in a non-creepy way to wake up with you in the morning and follow you throughout the entire day. Or you can just observe and become a master pattern recognizer. And I just did this to myself. The last few days, I essentially do this periodically. It takes a little work, but it's very powerful, is I go in and from the moment I wake up, I record what I do. Initially, so 4:45, initially became conscious. Laid in bed for 20 minutes, meditating, thinking, dozing, in and out. Got out of bed, 5:15. Got ready, brushed teeth, shaved, shower, all those things till 5:45. And really sort of document. And the reason why I'm documenting, here's the crazy part. I very rarely go back and look at what I wrote down. But because I'm documenting, I'm extremely aware. That's like, oh, I didn't realize I sort of wasted 10 minutes here doodling. By the way, you wouldn't write it down as doodling. What would you write it down as? Come on. Social media surfing. That was one, to be honest with you. I was a little bit of a hypocrite. I was a little bit of a liar, pants on fire, because I would go in and I would tell people, you spend too much time. And I honestly would be like, no, I don't actually waste time on social media. Here was my fictional story that I thought was facts. I just check social media to check my accounts to see how they're doing. The reality is, I was spending anywhere, I hate to say it, but I'm an honest man, I'll tell you the truth. I was spending anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours over 3 to 5 minute little chunks. 3 minutes here, 3 minutes here, 3 minutes here. But it adds up that about 2 hours a day, I was going in and checking and looking at social media. Now, once again, it was motivational. Yes, and some of it was good, and I use it to develop themes. Yes, but the point of it was this. It wasn't deliberate, it was a distraction, and it was a bad pattern. If I truly said, I'm going to spend 2 hours a day researching on social media, and I planned it out, that would be fine. But the point is, I wasn't consciously doing that, and it became a distraction. So the point is, you just very aware of how you use your time, and you'll become very optimized, very efficient. You'll see where your stories are very, very quickly. So you can sort of do like I do and become your own laboratory and just sort of start observing and tracking and seeing what's happening. But on that, this whole idea of fact versus fiction came into play. And as I'm studying my past students, all that became CISOs and have different degrees of success, I'm asking myself, Why is that? Why is that? And I'm asking myself now, I've been working the whole day in my studio, why is it that as soon as I start my podcast, a truck has to, and it's not even garbage day, but a truck has to consistently drive back and forth. And I'm in a cul-de-sac that's not that busy, but I'm like, really? The whole day, the last 4 hours I'm in here working and doing calls with clients. And as soon as I start my podcast, this amazing, wonderful, beautiful soul decides that he wants to drive the truck up and down the street right in front of my office. And of course, it's a nice day, even though it's December in Virginia and my window's open. So that's sort of why I'm laughing and smirking back and forth as he's going. But let me just bite the bullet and actually just do that instead of allowing that to sort of just make me laugh back and forth. And hopefully you couldn't hear it. To me, it was pretty loud. I have a good mic, so I'm hoping it didn't impact the audio quality. But life goes on, and you got to have fun with it. But I've noticed with these clients, there were various degrees of success. Some were a lot more successful than others. So I'm sitting there going, why is that the case? So I started talking with them. As I said before I went off on my little tangent, some of them, the higher end clients, I spend the day with them. And what I noticed is, it's the stories they tell themselves about how the company views cybersecurity that is directly proportional to their overall success. So the ones that I covered on our first episode were three of them. First, the fictional story that people believe to be facts, and it's the number one reason why organizations struggle with the CISO role, and many organizations don't respect their CISO, and it's because of the fictional statement that people believe to be true is that the only way to become a CISO is to be a security engineer for 15 years. The longer you are a security engineer, the better you are at becoming a CISO, and that is one of the biggest fictional lies on the planet. A CISO and a security engineer are two different positions. I'm not going to cover it again. Go back and listen to last week's video because I go into detail. I'm just refreshing. The next one is a CISO must have a technical background. That one actually is true. And then executives do not care about security. That one is not true. They care about it a lot. So now I'm going to jump into a few new ones. First one we're going to cover is cybersecurity is a technical problem and should be dealt with the same way we deal with IT. Fictional statement that is not true, but people believe it to be a fact, and it's also one of the reasons why we struggle so much in cyber. Cybersecurity is not a technical problem. Cybersecurity is a business problem. Technical problems can be completely solved. Business problems have to be carefully managed. You can't completely solve a business problem. You can completely solve a technical problem. And it leads back to where the next issue comes into play, which is technical problems are solved with money. Business problems are solved with meetings. And this is another area why IT came out before cyber, and because people grouped them together, they tried to think we solve cyber the way we solve IT. IT is a pure technical problem. IT, information technology, is focused on one thing and one thing alone, and that is uptime availability. If you've been a CIO, if you know a CIO, if you work with CIOs, it's quite simple. You typically have a metric with most companies is called the 5 nines. 99.999% uptime availability. So it's quite simple. That could be measured daily, monthly, weekly, quarterly, yearly, whatever it is. But you basically go in and you look at what is the uptime, and then you go in and say, okay, what was the unscheduled downtime, and you create a percent. And if you are above 99.999% uptime, you're a hero, you get bonus, and you keep your job. If you don't, then issues happen. But how do you solve that problem? Redundancy. You buy more pipes. You buy more servers. So it is, if you throw money at the problem of IT and you have a competent CIO, you can solve that problem. You can go in and you can buy enough data centers. You can buy enough connections. You can buy enough servers. You can buy enough redundancies so that your entire network doesn't go down. And there are some really big companies, if you look at a lot of the large credit card processing companies, yes, they have very localized outages, but in terms of their entire network going down, they have spent enough money to solve the problem. They have so many data centers in so many countries with so much redundancy, with so many failovers, that unless the world explodes and ceases to exist, their networks will continue to function. So that is IT. Technical problem can be solved and focused with buying enough equipment. So IT systems are being built in the 80s and 90s. We start getting the World Wide Web in early mid-90s. It starts to become a way businesses run. Everyone has websites, emails, and then all of a sudden we start going, what about this thing called security? How do we make sure it's protected? And because we were securing the IT infrastructure, people made the fictional assumption that it's the same as IT. That is a technical problem, and if we buy enough technology, we can be secure. So then they started going in and buying firewalls and intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems and data loss prevention and SIM, security incident event management, and data analytics, and the list goes on and on and on, where companies were basically saying, okay, if we increase our security budget based on the risk and we buy more stuff, we will be more secure. And the reality is that is not true, because it's not a technical metric. Cybersecurity is about understanding, managing risk to the enterprise. Managing risk to the enterprise is a business decision, and you manage it, you don't solve it. Because we all know 100% security in any realistic realm doesn't exist. 100% security means zero functionality. So the law, the rule of cybersecurity is when you add functionality, you decrease security. Or to put it another way, when you add functionality, you increase risk. But either way, they're inverse. So we need to recognize that as companies relied more and more on IT, and they added more IT, they added more functionality. You look at our websites today, they are so much more advanced than websites in the mid-90s, which means there's a lot more functionality, which means there's a heck of a lot more risk. And you go, okay, but we want to reduce the risk. Great, reduce the functionality. Well, I don't want to reduce the functionality. Well, you can't reduce the risk, so what do? You manage it. You manage it, but you can't remove it. And that's the piece that world-class CISOs get and world-class CISOs don't get. So if you want to know the difference between a world-class CISO and an average CISO, it's right there, my friends. World-class CISOs recognize the truth. And the truth is, cybersecurity is not a technical problem, it's a business problem. And business problems cannot be solved, they can only be managed. And the way they're managed is with communication via meetings to make everyone aware of what the risks and exposures are. So now you look at what's happening in most companies where they put in a CISO that is more technical than they probably should be. They don't speak business. They don't really meet with the executives on any regular basis. I met many, many CISOs, and this is the part that it just causes stress and terrifying to me. Do you realize average CISOs meet with their executive team less than once a quarter? I mean, that's insane. Imagine if you had a CFO, a chief financial officer, and they met with the executives 4 times a year. That's it. The rest of the time, they're in isolation doing their own thing. There wouldn't be a single successful company on the planet, my friends. CFOs and CEOs and COOs and board of directors are talking all the time. On normal occurrences, when people aren't on vacation, they are meeting daily, if not weekly. On a regular basis, they are texting, they are communicating. Why? Because they need to understand the finances to manage the business. They need to understand, you ready? They need to understand the risks so they can make proper decisions to drive revenue and profitability. A CISO is no different. So now you go in and you say, well, we're only meeting with them once a quarter, or even if it's once a month, which is on the super high end, that's still insane, because how are you going to properly manage risk if the executives are completely unaware of the risk? How are you going to manage risk if nobody knows what the risk is? And that's where the entire model is broken. It's because we're still under that fictional belief that cyber is an IT problem, and we don't open up our eyes. And companies, there's a few that have opened up their eyes and realized cybersecurity is a business problem, and business problems are managed with communication and meetings, and have increased communication with their CISOs, are the ones that are the most successful, are the ones that are the most secure, and the ones that are making the biggest difference in the world. So if you get nothing else other than that one piece, and that's why I'm hitting it so hard, you are going to be in a unique class of people that actually get and understand what it actually means to be a chief information security officer. And to tie it with that, I'm going to put in the other two, fact versus fiction. Comes up all the time. Can a CISO report to a CIO? Fictional. Now, are there exceptions where you have really good people that get along really well and can make it work for a short period of time? Absolutely. But the reality is, at some point, it will blow up. And the reason is simple. CIO is narrower than CISO. So if somebody with a broader spectrum of responsibility is reporting to somebody with a narrower spectrum of responsibility, it is not going to work, because from a CIO standpoint, they are ultimately rewarded, bonused, and financially driven based on 5 nines. They can tell you otherwise. They could go, oh no, Eric, I know that's how I'm measured, but I do care about those other things. Fine. But at the end of the day, here's the truth. When the pressure is put on and you have to make a decision between what you are formally bonused and paid to do versus what you are informally trying to do, the formality will always win. At the end of the day, the 5 nines is going to dominate, because that's what brilliant CIOs do. So the reality is, you can say it all you want, but it is a fictional statement that putting a CISO reporting to a CIO will be effective long term, because the CISO is responsible for managing risk as a business problem, and the CIO has a much narrower focus. So let's flip it. What about CIOs reporting to CISOs? That actually is more of a factual statement, because if we really break it down, a CIO is 1/3 of the CISO's role. A chief information security officer is responsible for cybersecurity. And just for a refresher, I know you've heard it if you listen to me for a while. What is cybersecurity? Come on, let me hear it. Let me hear it. Come on, come on, come on. If you can't say it, you need to memorize it. Cybersecurity, simple, easy, to the point. Here is the definition. Cybersecurity is all about understanding, managing, and mitigating risk of your critical data being disclosed, altered, or denied access. That's it. 3 things. It's risk, critical data, CIA. Confidentiality, integrity, availability. What is IT? Availability. So it's actually 1/3 of what a CISO does. So if we actually organized it correctly, the CISO would be one of the top core COs. You'd have your CEO, your COO, your CFO, your CISO, and your chief legal counsel. That's sort of the core 5. The core 5 in any organization. You need an executive officer, an operating officer, a financial officer, a information security officer, which is also risk underneath, and your legal officer. But here's the problem. Companies don't understand that, and they create all these others, because here's the reality. Under the CISO is the risk officer. Under the CISO is the CIO. Under the CISO is the data privacy officer. Right? All those things are components of cybersecurity. So I go into these companies where you have the CISO buried under the CIO. You then have a risk officer that's equal to the CIO, and then you have a data privacy officer that's reporting to and I'm like, okay, you sorta got it, but you're not putting it together correctly. Right? It's like going in and you have the right ingredients, but you're putting them in the wrong order, in the wrong amounts, right? You're not going to get the same outcome. So it's like they're trying, but they never stepped back and really understood what cybersecurity is. Cybersecurity includes risk. It includes data protection. It includes availability. It includes integrity. So if we do it correctly moving forward, the factual way to set up an organization is you have your CEO, your COO, your CFO, your chief legal, and your CISO, and then all those components fall very nicely under that CISO component. So I actually thought this was going to be a 2-part series, but guess what? We're going on to 3 because I still got 4 more, right? I got excited today, went off on some tangents, but as always, it's a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Life of a CISO. Make sure you go back and listen to part 1. Make sure next week you listen to part 3. And also, if you don't know, I've started a separate podcast called Bulletproof Cyber, which is all about the unique mindset that's needed to succeed as a cybersecurity professional. So I know in the beginning, my Life of a CISO sort of covered both of those, but earlier this year, I decided to split it. So Life of a CISO is really on a CISO, and then Bulletproof Cyber is really on the mindset you need to be world-class.